In the final desperate months of World War II, as the fires of the Pacific burned hotter than ever, Japanese soldiers began facing an enemy they couldn't see, one that seemed to strike out of the darkness itself. The island of Okinawa had turned into a fortress of chaos, a brutal proving ground where every hill, cave and trench was soaked in blood. The Japanese fought with the same fierce resolve that had defined them throughout the war, but this time something was different. At night, when silence usually brought a fragile moment of safety, death came suddenly, precisely, and without warning. American troops were now equipped with a secret weapon that gave them eyes in the dark. It wasn't a tank, a bomber, or a flamethrower, it was a rifle. More specifically, it was the lightweight M2 Carbine, modified into a terrifyingly advanced machine capable of spotting enemies invisible to the human eye. Soldiers began to whisper about it in the ranks, calling it the snooper's gun, a weapon that turned night into day. For the first time in history, one side could fight effectively after sunset, transforming darkness from a danger into an advantage. The Japanese were stunned, unable to comprehend how their hidden positions were discovered so easily. They believed ghosts were haunting the hills, but this was no ghost. It was the dawn of a new kind of warfare, one that would forever change the battlefield. By early 1945, the Pacific War had become a grinding, relentless struggle. Each island captured brought the Allies closer to Japan, but at a terrible cost. The Japanese military had turned every patch of land into a fortress, where surrender was unthinkable and death was often seen as honor. The Battle of Okinawa, launched in April 1945, was the bloodiest of them all. A massive, chaotic confrontation that would decide the fate of the Pacific. Over 180,000 Allied troops faced more than 100,000 deeply entrenched Japanese soldiers who had prepared for months. The island's ridges and caves became traps of fire, filled with machine gun nests, snipers, and artillery hidden beneath layers of rock. For the Americans, every step forward meant another ambush, another counterattack, another night of uncertainty. The Japanese were masters of nighttime infiltration, slipping through the darkness to attack sleeping camps, sabotage positions, and vanish before dawn. Their ability to move unseen made night fighting one of the deadliest aspects of the Pacific campaign. US soldiers dreaded the darkness. It stripped away their advantage in numbers and firepower. Even the most seasoned troops found their nerves tested when the sun went down. Commanders knew they needed something new, something that could give their men sight in the blackness. Conventional tactics weren't enough. Flares revealed positions. Searchlights made perfect targets. Radar couldn't pick out individual soldiers hiding among rocks or trees. Every night, the same pattern repeated. Silence, movement, gunfire, confusion, then chaos. The jungle was alive with whispers and shadows that could kill. The US Army's response was not another large weapon or heavy vehicle. It was innovation on a personal level. Engineers and scientists were quietly working behind the scenes to give soldiers a technological edge that had never existed before. At research facilities and testing grounds back in the United States, a new kind of optical device was being developed. It would allow soldiers to see in complete darkness by detecting invisible light, infrared light. While the concept had been experimented with before, no one had yet succeeded in making it compact and reliable enough for use on the battlefield. As Okinawa loomed, the timing couldn't have been more critical. American forces were preparing for what they knew could be the final invasion before the homeland itself. The stakes were enormous. Any advantage, no matter how small, could save lives and shorten the fight. The Japanese defenders believed the night would always be their ally, that the cover of darkness would continue to protect them as it had on countless islands before. They didn't know that in secret, American engineers were about to strip that advantage away. By the time the first US soldiers set foot on Okinawa, this new technology was ready to be tested in real combat. The stage was set for one of the most remarkable demonstrations of battlefield innovation in history. What began as a desperate need to counter nighttime attacks would soon lead to the birth of a new kind of warfare, one that could see in the dark. The weapon chosen to carry this groundbreaking technology wasn't a heavy rifle or a cumbersome machine gun. It was the M1 Carbine, later upgraded to the fully automatic M2. Originally designed as a lightweight weapon for support troops, drivers, and paratroopers, the Carbine quickly earned respect on the battlefield. Weighing less than half of a standard M1 Garand, it was easy to carry, fast to aim, and surprisingly accurate at close range. Its smaller 30 caliber round meant less recoil, allowing soldiers to fire rapidly and maintain control in tight combat situations. In the jungles and caves of the Pacific, where mobility often decided survival, the M1 and M2 carbines became a soldier's best friend. Unlike the heavier battle rifles that required careful handling and deliberate shots, the M2 could unleash a storm of bullets with a flick of the selector switch. Its lightweight and high rate of fire made it ideal for close-quarters combat, ambushes and quick reactions, precisely what the conditions in Okinawa demanded. American soldiers began modifying their weapons for speed and maneuverability, stripping away anything unnecessary. They needed something that could move with them through the dense terrain, something that could respond instantly to a sudden threat. But what truly set the M1 and M2 apart wasn't just their design, it was their adaptability. Engineers saw in them the perfect platform for experimentation. The Carbine's light frame could handle new attachments without becoming too heavy for a single soldier to carry. It could be equipped with optics, new sights, and even experimental technology. When the idea of pairing a rifle with infrared, night vision first surfaced, the Carbine was the natural choice. Soldiers had already proven the Carbine's effectiveness in countless engagements, but at Okinawa, it would take on an entirely new role. This wasn't just another rifle anymore. It was about to become the first weapon in history that allowed a man to fight effectively in total darkness. For the first time, technology was about to extend human senses beyond their natural limits. What began as a lightweight defensive weapon was evolving into a tool of unseen precision. In the shadows of Okinawa, the M2 Carbine was no longer just a firearm. It was the future of warfare taking shape in the soldier's hands. The transformation from a standard rifle into a night hunting weapon came through the addition of a remarkable new device, the M3 infrared sniper scope. Nicknamed the Snooper Scope, it was one of the most secret projects of the U.S. Army's engineering corps. The idea was revolutionary. Use invisible infrared light to illuminate the battlefield and then detect it with a special sensor. To the naked eye, the night remained pitch black, but through the scope, the scene came alive in glowing shades of green and gray. For the first time, soldiers could spot enemies hiding in the darkness without revealing their position. The M3 system consisted of three main parts: the infrared lamp, the image converter scope, and a large battery pack carried on the soldier's back. The lamp emitted a beam of infrared light, completely unseen by the human eye, but the scope's detector could pick up the reflections from that light. When Japanese troops crouched in the shadows, thinking they were hidden, their outlines appeared clear and ghost-like in the gunner's viewfinder. The operator could calmly take aim and fire before the enemy even knew they were being watched. It was a strange, eerie experience for the soldiers who first used it. They described seeing the night in a way no human had ever seen before, a world of glowing shapes moving silently through blackness. Some said it felt like hunting ghosts. The infrared carbine gave U.S. troops an almost supernatural edge, allowing them to patrol, defend, and attack under the cover of darkness with precision. The Japanese, who relied heavily on night infiltration and ambushes, suddenly found their advantage disappearing. However, the system wasn't perfect. The equipment was bulky, the battery heavy, and the range limited to about 75 yards. But despite its flaws, it worked, and that alone changed everything. For the first time, technology gave soldiers the power to dominate the night. Each infrared unit turned one man into an entire watchtower, able to guard perimeters and strike unseen targets with deadly accuracy. The combination of the M2 Carbine's rapid fire and the M3 scope's night vision made a weapon that redefined what was possible on the battlefield. In the dense darkness of Okinawa, the future of modern warfare had just been born. When the M3-equipped carbines arrived on Okinawa, few soldiers truly understood what they were holding. The island was a nightmare, mud, rain, and endless combat against an enemy that refused to surrender. The Japanese defenders had dug deep into hillsides, turning every ridge into a maze of bunkers and caves. Fighting them in daylight was deadly enough, but at night it became nearly impossible. They would crawl through tall grass, slip between foxholes, and launch sudden bayonet attacks under cover of darkness. That's when the infrared units were finally brought into action. Small squads were chosen for night patrols, each carrying one of the new M3 carbines. The setup looked odd, a rifle with a scope connected by wires to a heavy battery pack strapped to the soldier's back. But the results were astonishing. As the jungle swallowed the moonlight, the operators flipped on their infrared lamps and the night seemed to transform. Hidden shapes appeared in their scopes, bodies moving, crouching, waiting to strike. Before the enemy could react, bursts of carbine fire tore through the darkness. The attackers never even saw where the bullets came from. Word spread quickly through the ranks. Soldiers began to realize that this new weapon gave them a power no army had ever possessed before, the ability to see and kill in complete darkness. Japanese troops, who once used the night to their advantage, suddenly found themselves being hunted after sunset. Many thought they were facing a new type of supernatural force. Reports from the front described terrified soldiers abandoning positions, convinced that American troops could see through walls or sense movement without light. The success of the infrared teams transformed nighttime operations. Defensive lines that once needed constant flares or searchlights were now secured quietly and efficiently. Snipers used their M3 carbines to pick off infiltrators before they came within striking distance. The balance of power on the island shifted almost overnight. In a campaign where every inch of ground was fought for, this unseen technology gave American forces the edge they desperately needed. The Battle of Okinawa would be remembered not only for its ferocity, but also for the silent revolution that began in the darkness, where a handful of soldiers carrying strange-looking rifles changed the nature of warfare forever. The true impact of the M3 infrared carbines became clear as the Battle of Okinawa dragged on. Only about 150 of these special units were deployed, yet their effect on the battlefield was staggering. Reports from field officers revealed that these rifles were responsible for nearly 30% of all Japanese rifle casualties during the campaign. That figure astonished military analysts. How could so few weapons account for such a devastating portion of the enemy's losses? The answer lay in their precision and the psychological chaos they created. When darkness fell, Japanese soldiers could no longer rely on the cover of night. Every movement, every shadow could mean death. The infrared-equipped patrols became silent predators. They guarded perimeters, ambushed infiltrators, and dismantled night assaults before they could even begin. One squad could hold ground that once required dozens of men. The Japanese, unable to locate or anticipate these invisible hunters, found their morale collapsing. Survivors later described how soldiers were struck down without warning, often with no sound other than a few muffled shots in the distance. Fear spread through the ranks, and some units refused to conduct nighttime attacks altogether. For the Americans, this new weapon was more than just a tactical advantage. It was proof that technology could outthink even the most determined enemy. Commanders began requesting more units, eager to expand this capability. The effectiveness of the infrared system changed how troops approached night fighting. Instead of avoiding combat after dark, they now planned operations specifically for nighttime, knowing the enemy would be at a fatal disadvantage. Still, the M3 had its limits. Its range and heavy battery pack made it awkward for long patrols, and only a handful of soldiers could be trained to use it properly. But its success was undeniable. Each mission demonstrated how crucial visibility and control of the night could be. In Okinawa's brutal landscape of caves and ridges, where visibility was often measured in feet, the ability to see in the dark was nothing short of revolutionary. Those 150 rifles didn't just win battles, they revealed the future of warfare, where light and shadow would become as strategic as bullets and bombs. The lessons learned from Okinawa spread quickly through the U.S. military. Commanders realized that the M3 infrared system wasn't just a battlefield experiment, it was the first glimpse into a new era of technological warfare. The success of those few units proved that the side controlling visibility would always control the fight. In the months that followed, engineers and weapons specialists worked tirelessly to refine the design. They reduced the size of the batteries, improved the range of the infrared beam and strengthened the image resolution in the scope. These upgrades laid the foundation for the next generation of night vision devices that would soon see action in Korea and later in Vietnam. The M3's influence extended beyond rifles. It inspired research into vehicle-mounted systems for tanks, jeeps, and even aircraft. Night combat was no longer considered impossible. It became an advantage waiting to be exploited. What began as a secret project tested by a few brave soldiers on Okinawa grew into a full-fledged field of military science. The term electronic warfare began to take shape as the line between human senses and machine capabilities blurred. The US Army and Navy both saw the potential and started investing heavily in infrared detection, radar coordination, and optical enhancement technologies. For soldiers who had witnessed the M3's power firsthand, the memory of those glowing shapes in the scope never faded. They had seen the battlefield transformed by light invisible to the naked eye, and they knew war would never be the same again. No longer would darkness offer safety or cover. It would become just another domain to dominate. In the years that followed, the same principles behind the M3 evolved into the advanced night vision goggles and thermal sights used by modern armies. Tanks, helicopters, and infantry units all carried the legacy of that first infrared carbine. The idea that a soldier could fight effectively in total darkness, once unthinkable, was now a standard expectation. The innovation born in the jungles and caves of Okinawa had quietly changed how wars would be fought for generations. When the smoke of Okinawa finally cleared, the true significance of the M3 infrared carbine became undeniable. What began as a small secret experiment had proven that technology could completely rewrite the rules of battle. For the first time in human history, an army had fought and won using vision beyond the limits of the human eye. The Japanese defenders never understood what struck them. To them, the night had always been a shield, a trusted ally that allowed stealth, ambush, and survival. But on Okinawa, that shield shattered. In those final weeks of the Pacific War, darkness no longer belonged to the shadows, it belonged to the light. After the war ended, the few remaining M3 units were carefully studied, their performance analyzed in detail. Military scientists recognized that these infrared rifles had done far more than eliminate enemy soldiers. They had changed strategy itself. Future wars would no longer pause when the sun went down. Commanders began planning for 24-hour combat operations, where visibility could be controlled rather than endured. This single innovation had forced armies around the world to rethink everything they knew about timing, defense, and terrain. Even as new conflicts arose in the decades that followed, the spirit of the M3 lived on. Its descendants, modern night vision scopes, infrared cameras, and thermal imaging systems, became essential tools for every major military power. What was once carried by a handful of soldiers on a single island evolved into a core component of global warfare. Every mission flown at night, every patrol guided by green-tinted lenses, traced its roots back to those first experiments in 1945. The Battle of Okinawa had been a turning point in many ways, but the quiet revolution of the M3 infrared carbine stood out as one of its most enduring legacies. It showed that innovation could be as powerful as firepower, and that the next great advantage wouldn't come from strength alone, but from the ability to see what others could not. From that moment on, the darkness was no longer a place to hide. It had become another battlefield to conquer, illuminated by the invisible light first carried into war by the M3 carbine.